Good morning, my excellent friends. How are we this morning? And I'm sure probably a good number of you are a little bit confused right now. You're going, wait a minute, Marianne only read one verse. Are we really only going to be covering one verse in worship this morning? And all that one verse said was Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh and married his daughter. How in the world are we going to pull anything meaningful from just that one verse? Okay, well, let's look at the passage one more time. Put it up on the screen for me, please. Okay, take a good look at that. Because what you are seeing right before your eyes is the beginning of the downfall of one of the most wise men to ever walk the planet. Okay, the last time I stood in the pulpit here, I told you about one of the most wise rulings that Solomon made in absolving himself from guilt in the situation with Shimei. He put the ball in Shimei's court for Shimei to do with as he willed. And we will continue to see Solomon act wisely in his ruling of his people. At that moment right there, immortalized in the words of the first verse of the third chapter of 1 Kings, is the beginning of Solomon's downfall. Okay, now I don't want the women in the room to think what I'm saying is women are evil. That's not what I'm saying, okay? So it is only one short, simple verse, but it carries with it an important message that I hope everyone within the sound of my voice will hear and take to heart. Okay, young people especially, I hope you hear me this morning, because what this passage lays before us is the institution of marriage. I'm going to fight the urge not to quote The Princess Bride right now. And how appropriate is it, okay, that on the day after we just saw two members of our church family united in the covenant of marriage, that this is what the Holy Spirit has decided to lay before us today. Isn't that interesting? And I can think of no other thing in the world today that has been as over-romanticized and yet also cheapened at the same time as much as marriage has. I'm sure there were probably young men and women at the ceremony yesterday thinking to themselves, man, I can't wait to get married. Well, listen up, okay? Because marriage is a very serious thing in God's eyes, and we need to treat it with the respect that it deserves. For decades now, Disney in particular, but others as well, have been bombarding us with unrealistic expectations when it comes to love and marriage. Just a few weeks ago, I went and saw a production of The Little Mermaid. And while I enjoyed the production, and I have to admit I enjoy the story and particularly the music of The Little Mermaid, there is no denying that that story gives you and me, and particularly young girls, an unrealistic example of how love works. Okay? Ariel sees her prince and immediately knows he's the one. She gives up everything that she holds dear, even her beautiful voice, to be with that boy. They can't even talk to each other. But wouldn't you know it, with a little help from her animal friends, Ariel and the prince and Prince Eric still fall in love, or more accurately, they convince Eric to fall in love with Ariel, because remember, she's already fallen in love with this boy that she's never met. They thwart the evil sea witch, and they sail off into the sunset to live happily ever after. Now, don't take it the wrong way. Remember, I said I really like the story, but it is over-romanticized garbage. Okay? What is it that attracts Ariel to Eric in the first place? He's really hot, right? That's pretty much it. She sees him and instantly falls in love with no knowledge of who he is or what kind of person he is. He makes her feel something in her half-fishy tum-tums, and so she concludes that he is the one she is supposed to marry, no matter how impossible that might seem at the time. So marriage has been so overly romanticized that kids and teenagers today don't understand the full weight of what it is that they like to fantasize about. But on the other hand, marriage has also been so cheapened that today, as I speak to you, 50% of marriages, I'm just generalizing, by the way, it's more specific than that, but 50% of all marriages will end in divorce. Okay, now divorce is another topic, which we do not have time to go into this morning. Believe me, I wish I could. But suffice it to say, God hates divorce, and his directive to all of us that belong to him is no divorce. But marriage has become such an overly romanticized thing and so cheapened in our day that 50% of marriages end in divorce. And by the way, that percentage is actually worse in the church. Okay, so don't think that this is just some worldly heathen problem. It's right here amongst us. Today, people see marriage as simply a contract that they enter into with the government in order to get a few breaks on their taxes. Or they see it as something that is all about them and how that other person makes them feel, like Ariel and Eric. That other person makes me feel better than anyone I've ever met, and I don't want that feeling to stop. I want it to keep going, so I'm going to tie that person down so they can't leave. That way, that feeling never goes away either. But as novelty of that feeling fades to routine, suddenly that person doesn't make me feel that way they used to. And so I seek out someone else who can help replicate what I first felt when I met that person that I'm now divorcing. Plus, it isn't as if we made this covenant with anyone other than that other person and the U.S. government, so what's the big deal, right? What's the big harm? Okay, no one likes the government anyway, right? But the question we should be asking here this morning is that what marriage is all about? Well, to understand that, we need to start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. We need to go back to the Garden of Eden and look at the very first marriage. But before we go there, let me just address some objections that I can hear already formulating in some people's heads right now. Okay, first objection. Paul isn't even married. So how could he possibly tell me anything about marriage? Okay, well, first off, that is what we would call an appeal to authority. In essence, what you were saying is that since I have not experienced or done said thing, I have no authority to speak on the matter. Okay, that is a logical fallacy and erroneous argumentation. Okay, a doctor doesn't need to have a certain disease in order to diagnose it and advise on it. A historian never lived in ancient Rome, yet he can still speak accurately about it. A mechanic is not a car, but yet he knows exactly how that thing works. So I don't need to experience marriage in order to talk on the matter. I can study, I can learn, I can talk to others, I can use my reasoning skills to accurately speak on the topic. Okay? And second, what I'm going to give you in regards to marriage are not my personal opinions on the matter. Rather, I am going to pull them strictly from the Word of God, the guy who instituted and invented marriage in the first place. Okay? It's his, so it's probably a good idea to listen to him on the matter. And that speaks directly to the second objection that I can hear forming in people's minds. And the objection is simply this: I don't care what Paul says, I'm going to do it my way anyway. And the truth of the matter is this: I can't force you to do anything. I'm not your dad. Okay, but again, what I am going to give you this morning about marriage is not what Paul says. It is God's word on the matter. So you can choose to go against that. But last time I was up here, we talked about staying within the boundaries God has set for us and what happens when we leave those boundaries and run away from the life toward the only other option, death. Destruction follows if you do that. So you can try and do it your way. God may be merciful, but it really just makes more sense to follow him in the first place, doesn't it? Okay, now, with that out of the way, objections to the side now, let's go back to the beginning, okay? So join me in Genesis chapter 2. Go all the way back. Genesis chapter 2. Okay, and at verse 18 is where we're going to start. At verse 18 it says, Yahweh God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." So God notices that Adam, the man, that's who the man is here, Adam, the man is alone and states that it is not good. This is the first time in all of the creation narrative that something is declared not good. And I could go off on a tangent right here regarding the Trinity and how man who was made in God's image should not be alone, and that reflects that God is a relational God, that it's not good that man is alone is in fact God recognizing that in order for a man to reflect the image of God completely, he must be a relational being, just like the infinite God has been in relation with himself for all of eternity. But the topic this morning is not the Trinity. Okay, it's marriage, so let's focus here. I mean, the way you guys get distracted. Come on. So what is it that God declares is not good? Okay? He declares that it's not good that man is alone. Okay? Note, and this is very, very important for you to note, it does not say that man is lonely. So it is not that Adam was just down in the dumps because he has no one to share the garden with. The problem is not that Adam is lonely, but rather that he is alone. God recognizes that in order to be everything that Adam is meant to be, he will need help. So God decides that the solution is to make Adam a helper. The phrase in the English is usually translated a helper suitable for him, but in the Hebrew the term is etzer kenegdo. And make sure you get those words tattooed on your eyeballs, because that is what a marriage partner is meant to be. Etzer is the word that means help or helper, and kenegdo is the word that means one who stands opposite of. So an etzer kenegdo, a marriage partner, is meant to be a helper who corresponds to, who is suitable for, who stands opposite to another. One of the same kind, but different. Equal in status and importance, but with a different function. A partner who is equal, but has a different role. Someone to help accomplish the task together that God has assigned those two to do. The two are to work together to accomplish whatever God has called the other to. They are not simply someone who makes you feel really good. They are not simply a way to help cure your loneliness, nor are they a tool to establish a political or social alliance. They are to be an equal partner meant to help the other be everything it is God has called them to be. That is the first thing that marriage is about. It is a relationship meant to help both individuals become the people God calls them to be. God sees that Adam doesn't have this, and that is therefore not good. So, an interview process is held. God brings all the animals to Adam to name them and to look for an etzer kenegdo so he will no longer be alone. Okay, now, don't get it twisted and think that Adam could have potentially picked an elephant to be his etzer kenegdo. Okay, no, God is doing something here. There is a purpose behind this. Okay, with every animal, the animal names, he sees etzer kenegdo amongst them. Okay, the ram has the ewe. The wolf has the she-wolf. The lion has the lioness. The same, but different. They are not alone because they each had their one that stands opposite to them. Equal in importance, but different in role. But Adam has no one. And so God puts Adam to sleep and draws out from his flesh one of his ribs, and from that rib he creates Eve. So Adam's one flesh has become two now at this moment. And upon seeing her, Adam recognizes that this is what all the animals had, and he didn't. She is his etzer kenegdo, his helper. And so he takes her under his wing of protection. And Adam then utters some beautiful words that declare what Eve truly is. He says, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." These are the very first wedding vows. And in them are great and deep meaning that has been thrown away in our modern culture. Adam is declaring that his flesh, that was once one, then was made two by God removing his rib, is once again made one through the covenant of marriage. The text goes on to say, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. The word translated one there in the verse is the Hebrew word echad, and is the word that can mean numerically one, but it can also mean a union of things, a complex one. It is the very same word that is used in the Shema, the great proclamation of faith found in Deuteronomy 6:4. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is echad." He is one. And this right here is why marriage must be taken seriously. And here we find the second and third thing that we must understand about marriage. Okay? In a marriage, a man and wife are a reflection of the very nature of God. They are to be one just as he is one. They are to be united just as the Trinity is united. Each has their own distinct roles to fill, but yet they are united in purpose and essence. Man and wife are to be such a unit that they can't be separated, just as the triune God cannot be separated. So marriage is an ordered, covenantal relationship where a man and woman become one, each with their own roles to fill, but united in purpose. Now, that unity comes naturally to God. But literally, it is part of his nature to be this complex one that he is. But it is not part of our nature. That means if we are to answer the calling God is placing on us in the covenant of marriage, we better take it really seriously and understand it is going to take a bunch of work on our part to accomplish it. But the difficulty of the task cannot stop us from undertaking it or giving it up. In God's eyes, marriage is a very serious thing because it is a reflection of his very being. You cannot separate him, and so man and wife must be one forever. This is why the interview process is so important. See, you can read the story of Adam and Eve and mistake what happens when Adam sees Eve as love at first sight. Okay? But you would be wrong. Okay? Remember, Adam had to name all the animals and see if he could find his helper among them. It is not first sight when Adam sees Eve. He has been looking for her the whole time. He has been naming all the animals, which is why when he finally sees her, it is so obvious to him what she means to him. What does this mean for us? It means if you are planning on getting married, you better follow Adam's example and do the interview process. You better name all the animals so you can find your Eve. Okay? Now, what exactly am I telling you to do? Am I telling you to date? No. Okay, at least I am not telling you to date the way our modern culture tells you to. Okay? You can get to know someone without putting yourself in risky situations alone with that other individual before you even really know them. And you certainly should not even be contemplating the concept of any kind of dating scenario if you're not ready to get married. You know, what do I mean by ready? Okay, well, listen very closely. I do not mean that you just arbitrarily decided that you're ready. Okay, got that? What I mean is you are financially secure, you have your own household, you have a job, you are confident and sure of who you are as a person. Okay, let me just sum this up. If you are still living in your parents' house, if you're still going to school, I don't care what school, if it's college, if it's high school, if it's middle school, if it's elementary school, let me just cover all my bases and say preschool. Okay? If you struggle to have a set identity and allow others to manipulate you, you have no business even considering going on a date with anybody. Okay, now I know I just lost every young person in the room right now. Okay? Please don't tune me out. Okay? Dating is meant to find your etzer kenegdo. You are not ready for marriage right now, so you don't need to find them yet. Trust me, God will bring them to you when it's time. Okay, but you say, I think I've already found him or her. What do I do? Well, if that person is truly your etzer kenegdo, they will be there when you are ready to get married. Until then, concentrate on becoming the person God wants you to be, because your job, once you're married, is to help that other person be everything they can be. You can't be concentrating on yourself. Okay? The reason why 50% of marriages end in divorce today is because everyone makes their marriage about them. Don't make the same mistake. When you get married, your concentration should and must be about accomplishing the task God has placed on both of you. It cannot be about finding who you are. You should already know that. And right now, those of you who I'm talking to right now, still got a lot of growing to do, to grow. Okay, now what happens if you're older than that age group that I just addressed? Well, if you are secure in who you are as a person and in life, and you feel God calling you to marriage, then you need to do the interview process just like Adam. Okay, you need to name all the animals so you can find your Eve. Okay, but please, please, please do not date the world tells you to. Dating is not merely a form of entertainment for you. Dating has a purpose, and it is to find your Etzer Kenegdo. Okay, what that means is all the taboo topics that you're not supposed to talk with someone about on a first date, okay, religion, politics, etc., talk about them on the very first date. Don't waste your time or the time of that other person. Okay? They may be someone else's Etzer Kenegdo, but are only a bear or a dolphin to you. Okay? And all you are doing by avoiding those topics that will expose the truth is you are delaying them finding their Etzer Kenegdo. Dating must be purposeful, and it must be only done safely. You can get to know someone without being alone with that person in compromising situations. Also, be aware. Hey, the scripture tells us that not everybody is called to marriage. I know that our culture and even some other churches tell you that you must get married. God says otherwise in his word. So pray about it and ask him if he's calling you to marriage. If he is, then do the interview process with purpose in mind. Okay, now let's go back to Solomon, because that's where we started all this. Okay, he missed the boat here. Okay, in his first marriage, when it comes to it, he missed the boat about what marriage is truly about. It is a reflection of God's very nature, okay? A unification of two individuals into one. He simply married a girl to get in good with her dad for political purposes. However, also note what that passage said about marriage, okay, that we just talked about, okay? It said, a man, singular, will leave his father and mother, both again singular and opposite sex, and be joined with his wife once more, singular. Marriage is between one man and one woman, and they become one flesh for life. Solomon missed the boat there too. Hey, probably one of the things best known about Solomon is the fact that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Now remember what the purpose of marriage is. The two individuals in a marriage are meant to help each other be the people God has called them to be, and to accomplish a task God has set for each of them. Now do the math with me. Let's just put the concubines to the side for 1 second, because hopefully we all are aware of how messed up that is. Okay, and let's just talk about Solomon and his wives. His job as their husband is to help them become the women that God has called them to be, and help them accomplish the tasks that God has set for them to accomplish. But he has 700 of them. That means if he spends, let's just say, the day with each wife, he only sees each individual wife about every 2 years. How in the world can he fulfill his role as husband to them when he barely even knows them? Okay, but yet, Solomon's predicament here gets even worse, because the text tells us that the wife he marries, she is the daughter of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So she is not an Israelite. and so does not worship the same God that Solomon does. In the Old Testament law, the Israelites were warned not to marry non-Israelites. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul takes it even further and declares that believers should avoid entering into contracts with non-believers. He says in 2 Corinthians 6:14, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers." This includes marriage, everybody. Marriage is a covenant. It is a contract. So believers should not even entertain marrying someone who is not a Christian. I know, thanks to Disney and other media, we have this knight in shining armor complex where we think we are going to save that other person. We're going to bring that other person to Jesus through our romantic relationship with them. But it almost never works out that way. In fact, it almost always manifests itself the opposite way. You will be led astray by that non-believer. But what if I'm already in a relationship with a non-believer? What should I do? Okay, well, it depends on what that relationship looks like. If you are merely dating each other, but not yet married, then you should leave that relationship. Or at least you should put it on hold till that person decides where they stand when it comes to Christ. Okay? I want to make this clear. Okay? To be clear, that does not mean that you hold your relationship with them over their head and tell them that you are leaving unless they come to Christ. That could result in a false confession and even more trouble. It means you end the relationship and you see what happens. If that person on their own comes to Christ, that is amazing, and you can start re-entertaining the idea that they may be your etzer connecto. If not, then you just dodged a huge bullet. Now, if you are married to a non-believer already, the situation becomes more complicated. Because remember, marriage is a very serious thing in God's eyes. It reflects his very nature, so it cannot just be thrown to the side. What you need to do is pray that God moves in your spouse's life and heart to lead them to him. Okay? Now, you can help with that process. What you must not even contemplate doing is divorcing that person. Divorce is never an option for a believer. If you want to talk with me more about that, you can talk with me after the service. Okay, so Solomon has missed the mark entirely here when it comes to marriage. He has neglected to follow God's direction with it, and it will come back to bite him. He left the boundaries that God set, and it will bring destruction. But before we get there, we would be remiss to not acknowledge what's probably the main reason Solomon did all this. Why did Solomon, perhaps the most wise king to ever live, have such a blind spot when it came to women and particularly marriage? Because he was following the example of his father David. Solomon himself is the product of one of David's many, we'll call them romantic, dalliances, where he strayed from God's prescription for marriage. Solomon watched his father and learned from his father and went even beyond what his father had done. And I feel like this is a lesson every time I preach, but I will keep saying it until I am blue in the face. Parents, your kids are watching you. I know it's creepy. Okay, but it's true. Okay? They watch what you do, what you don't do, and they learn how to be little humans from your example. If you want them to avoid the mistakes you made, teach them differently through the example you set in your actions. I know it is so easy to forget that every single thing you do is being seen and analyzed by a little mini version of you. But it is. Solomon watched his father, and he learned. So what is it about relationships and marriage that you are teaching your children? If you're single, are you teaching them to become the person God intends for them to be so that you can then potentially help someone else do the same? I say potentially again because not all of us are called to marriage. Or are you teaching them that you are directionless and pathetic without some other person to guide you instead of God guiding you? If you're married, are you showing them through your marriage what it truly means to be echad, to be one, to be that other person's etzer connecto? Two of the same kind, yet with different roles to fulfill, but united in purpose. Your kids are watching you, just like Solomon watched his father. Make sure you are teaching them through the way you live your life. And why is this such a big deal? Okay, why did we spend a whole Sunday on this one verse? Why did we spend this whole time talking about how important marriage and relationships are? Well, in order to understand that, we need to read this verse that we read in 1 Kings in light of a verse that comes later in that same book. In 1 Kings chapter 11, it tells us that Solomon loved many other women besides Pharaoh's daughter. Remember, 700 wives and 300 concubines. He ignored God's command when it comes to marriage, and as a result, verse 4 says, as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to Yahweh his God as the heart of David his father had been. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. He did not follow Yahweh completely as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Shamash, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. Because Solomon ignored God's command for marriage and united himself with these foreign women who worshiped foreign gods, be it for political purposes or others, he was led astray into worshiping those foreign gods, those gods other than Yahweh. He even built altars to these gods, where his wives, it says, offered sacrifices to them. Sacrifices that included burning Solomon's own children alive. Solomon left the boundaries that God had set. He fled from the life and found nothing but destruction. In fact, because of these abominations that he committed through the guidance of his wives, the kingdom was ripped from Solomon's hands. Marriage is a very serious thing. It is the first institution that God put in place after creation, and it is something that can build us up and make us instruments for God's glory, or tear us down if we don't follow the instructions he gave regarding it. Solomon is a glaring example of the latter. But here's the truth, and I hope I made it clear this morning. Solomon's problem is our problem too. It's easy to look at Solomon and see him allowing his wives to sacrifice his own children and condemn him and know that that's wrong. Let me ask you this. What does the person you're in a relationship with think about the topic of abortion? Do you understand that as man and wife, you are united in purpose and direction, or do you think that the husband just says jump and the wife says how high? Marriage, the family, are the most basic building blocks that our life here on earth is built upon. If that rock begins to crumble, the whole house falls down. Why do you think it is that marriage is under such attack in our culture? Why is it that we are encouraged so boisterously to stray from God's prescription for it? Because there is nothing on earth that can show us the true beauty of our God and who he is than a good, sound, biblical marriage. And there is nothing on earth that can cause us to doubt his existence more than a bad one. Solomon's behavior ruined the kingdom. Because of his disregard for God, the entire kingdom was split in two, causing death and destruction that Solomon never could have imagined when he married Pharaoh's daughter. But Solomon's problem is our problem. Don't let your approach to the institution of marriage destroy your kingdom, your family, your life. When we disregard God's boundaries and stray outside of them, it will cause more harm we can possibly imagine. Not only to us, but to those we care about. Marriage is a beautiful thing. And God gave it to us for our good. But don't make the same mistake Solomon made. Follow the instructions of the one who invented it, and it will be the blessing that God intended for it to be. Solomon's problem is, in truth, our problem. But it doesn't have to be.